Okay, I'm recording right as we speak. And hello, everyone. We just finished up with the HCLDR tweet chat, and the discussion was about tribes and silos. And I'm just going to give my just a minute or two version of what I think of in my own little world as an internist in a small rural town in Great Falls, Montana of about 50,000. I've been in internal medicine for going on 23 years now, private practice. And I like to think of what I do in the office. We've got 8 docs total. I've got over 1,000 of my own patients. And I like to think of my own group of patients that I've been caring for over 2 decades I like to consider it as a pseudo-siloed approach. I know we're all about busting up silos and free exchange of information, but from my own perspective, what I think is extremely important is to honor the patient's privacy, what they want shared with other offices, with other doctors. And we all talk about interoperability and what we share, this, that, and the other. But with the pseudo-siloed approach, I think you have to be able to exchange the information you build with your patient. What I like to do is use a large shared screen, build the chart together with each and every patient so they know what's in their own chart. They help me build it. So right then I have their approval. If I do share it, they help input all the data that goes into the chart so that when shared, they know what type of information is going to be shared. I think that's very important. So I like to refer to that as the pseudo-siloed approach. That is respecting the patient's privacy, sharing what they want me to share with those they want me to share it with. And I think we have to be able to respect that. The other part of the other side of the coin is being able to do that effectively, immediately, and with those outside the office, whether it be other hospitals, other doctors' offices. Yeah. To be able to do that. And what I've found, instead of waiting on EHR interoperability, if it ever will come about as fruition, is a health CRM intertwined with an EHR that interconnects palatable. I like to describe the EHR as palatable, very patient-friendly, so they can understand it as easily as I can when I screen share. But having a health CRM to be able to exchange that information immediately when the patient wants me to, or get information in or out of the office, a health CRM intertwined with an EHR, that's what I mean by pseudo-siloed approach. Thank you. I'll be quiet, and then we'll go from here. So whoever wants to speak next, take the floor. And whoever wants to jump open, we've got an extra open seat. So
we have an open seat. Open seat.
Jump on whoever wants to jump on.
And so I don't mean to jump in ahead of you, Katie.
Oh, no, please.
But I mean, it's like I sort of feel like Jimmy's an old friend. So it's like, and so anything that's sort of puzzling to me or interesting to me, I kind of want to nail down and get out of the way. And this is actually the first, heading into this week, was actually the first time I heard you use the word pseudo-silo. And it kind of set off, I'm all but dissertation in linguistics. So it's like words. I get into semantic networks and activation and synonyms and antonyms and retronyms. And so pseudo-silo to me means it's like a silo, but it's not a silo. Okay. And the two things that came to mind were that so to me, if you completely eliminate all silos, then you just have a giant pile of grain, and everything is completely intermingled, and that's a problem. If you're a farmer, you need to divide things up into categories, and you have to actually deal with the fact that things germinate in silos, which I learned last year. I interviewed a farmer about silo management. So there's an element there of, so what you're doing with your patients is not just automatically freed and available to the world, but rather, sort of processed or stored or vetted in some way. But the other thing is that and I know that we've talked about this before, and that is you have basically two systems. You have an electronic health record, and you have your CRM system. You call it your customer relationship management system, which is the portal system. And the two really are not, in a data interoperability way, they're not really, integrated. But you have this nurse who's sort of looking back and forth, and it's like your workflow engine. And that's also kind of a pseudo silo, because you have the kind of, if you're traveling in the Midwest, you see these grain elevators and you see a bunch of silos, and then you see things that are going from silo to silo, and those are the connectors. Those are the workflows between the silos. So anything that I just described, does it resonate with any of your...
Absolutely. And I'm going to keep it on the agricultural theme, since I married into a farm family. Is I like to call it the tripod approach. And that is, you think of how a milking stool is. Why does a milking stool have 3 legs instead of 4 legs? Because it's very stable when you're bending, trying to milk a cow. And I like to think of my approach that I use in the office, a tripod approach. And that is using the health CRM, like you mentioned, Chuck, the EHR, palatable EHR, and the nurse. It's that tripod approach that really gives the office stability. And if you can get a tech-savvy nurse who has a dual monitored screen, to have a telephone, the health CRM with the e-faxing in and out, the portal, the EHR, schedule, one great individual managing all that, it really takes you into the future, so you can do things like projected EHR and have... Oh,
stop.
Okay, I'll be quiet. Katie.
No, you can't talk about projected EHR. We have to let Katie say something.
Yeah, so maybe as well, it's not sort of tribes versus innovation or silos versus innovation, because I know when one of the questions on the chat was, do you see yourself as a part of a tribe, or what tribe? And I immediately thought of 3, which is funny because you're talking about the stability of a 3-legged stool. And I very much see myself as a researcher, a peer, and a nurse. I guess 4. Sorry, now it's not working out as well with the stool piece there. But I think I bring those identities and strengths with me. And I think I discovered bits of myself. I'm new. I've returned now to the research world, and I feel very much connected to that. But it's not making me siloed. I think it's giving me more to bring. Are you
associated with a research institution, a university?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Where is that?
So I'm in Boston, and I'm with Brigham and Women's right now.
Mm-hmm. And what is your research?
It's part of it's called a cardiac core imaging lab. And so it's all related to cardiology and specifically non-invasive imaging. Yep. And what I'm saying here is not as a representative of Brigham and Women's Hospital.
No. I think I heard you say you went back. So did you start kind of in research and then go off and then?
Yeah, I had done 10 years of research as a clinical research coordinator in pediatric cardiology, and then I got my health communication degree, which was public health at Tufts Med and communication at Emerson. And I ended up veering off and going to the world of homelessness, mental illness, and grant writing, and with at the federal level as well as the local level. And then I found my way back to research. I really missed it. And here I am. So I'm sort of brought it all back together.
Excellent.
We just got we're on this metaphorical riff. So Cascadia mentioned that silos are extremely dangerous. And because this is so last year I wrote for HL7 standards, I wrote something about workflow silos. So everybody talks about data silos. I like to talk about workflow silos. But one of the stories I included in there, and this is just it's a coincidence, and it's a bit of color and drama, and it's also sad. And that is my mother lives in a town, a county of about 14,000 people in Northwest Illinois, and which is big corn country. And a couple of years ago, in 2 different incidents, 3 people died. One was sucked into basically an avalanche. They were inside tugging on something, and then the other was an explosion. And so the reason I mentioned that in that piece was not to sort of defend silos, although when silos are operating correctly, they're actually very dynamic. Things, for example, grain germinates inside silos. I found that out from the farmer, and that's actually, so they're actually very dynamic. They're not this static enclosed data. But the idea that a silo will explode or there'll be an avalanche, the silos are not this static thing. They're actually these very dynamic things, and you try to harness the forces, the physical and the chemical and the biological forces for the goals of agriculture. But that's just, I'm sorry to go off on that.
And Chuck, I just wanted to follow up, and I know we're probably getting way over in the agricultural. Colin, I don't know if Colin's still here, but he was just laughing about that. He commented about that. But one of the really interesting things, silos here in Montana, wheat in silos can actually, if the humidity or the moisture content's down, the wheat can last for years. In fact, there's a farmer here locally, a organic farmer that actually has wheat grains from Egypt, thousands of years old that he grows. What's that called? Kamut wheat. So silos can actually contain grain if the humidity is low enough for thousands of years. Believe it or not, it can grow. It can grow. The seed from 1,000 years.
Wait a minute. The grains of wheat are not literally 2,000 years old, but rather the strain descended.
The strain, absolutely. The strain from the grain, 1,000 years old.
Because I just got done reading a book called Seeds. It's about about the importance of seeds to humanity as a foodstuff and evolution and so forth. And they have discovered seeds in glaciers and various places that are thousands of years old and gotten them to germinate. So that's why I thought. And so I thought, oh, this farmer's got like a whole silo of these. But no, okay.
So we have all these silos in healthcare. We have to figure out, whenever if ever EHR interoperability comes, we have to figure out creative ways to exchange ideas quick, fast, immediate. And I think the health CRM is a great solution right now that is being effectively used in my office. So silos are in the healthcare here. We just have to deal with it and figure out how to get that information for patient care. And it can be done.
Well, maybe we too can look at other businesses and see how they work creatively. And
hello, Colin.
Oh, hi.
Hey, good evening, you guys. Thanks for putting this on.
You bet.
Part of the after hour.
What's that?
I said I'm part of the after
I'm sorry. I just got to jump in there. Okay, so Colin,
we got to put you on the spot.
For anybody here on the activity stream that just tuned in that happened to have missed God forbid they missed, but maybe there's one of the 10 people or 11 people that are watching. Well, give us the 1-minute synthesis of the previous healthcare leadership hour.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let me synthesize that in 1 minute. Well, we talked about
that's 10 seconds now.
10 seconds. Okay. So we talked about silos, and silos were very they're very proliferate. They proliferate in healthcare. I think we were talking a lot about how can we break down silos. I think there's some interesting concepts around when maybe we shouldn't even break them down at all. Maybe we should just spend time connecting them, because I think Pat Rich and a few other folks were, and I think Shimcode as well, were saying silos are going to happen. That they're naturally going to happen because of the way people are, because of the way the financial incentives are in place. So rather than fight them and try to destroy them, just try to connect them. And start there, or maybe we can ground them in some sort of commonality. So that was some of the essence of the discussion. It was very interesting to see that most people believe that silos are a natural phenomenon and are going to be there in healthcare. There's really no fighting it. But a lot of interesting ideas as well on how they've experienced their silos and what they've done to try and try to break down those walls. So anyway, probably didn't do it justice, but that's kind of what I got out of the chat tonight. Lots and lots of different people chiming in on their experiences, good and bad, with those sides. So that's
I'm reminded of. I'm not a martial artist, but I saw a Bruce Lee movie once, and there was this thing about using you're fighting with something, grappling with something, and you have to use their own behavior and weight against them. And so this idea of silos are bad, but maybe they're not completely bad. Maybe there's something good about them, or some way you can sort of use their silo-ness to actually, and that's just that maybe, I don't know if that's jujitsu or whatever, but, sort of using the intrinsic nature of the silo. If we really understand what silos are, and metaphors, these agriculture metaphors, I mean, I hate the nuclear metaphor, which is, silo busting, because it involves, thermonuclear devices. So is there, how do we take this concept of silo and and somehow either use it against itself or turn it into something good that we can leverage or reframe what a silo is. I think that's an interesting idea.
I know when I think Mayo Innovations on here, and so Mayo had some interesting things to say. So I was thinking about silo prevention, but listening to Jim talk about there are these silos, but for instance, you have someone who's considered a connector, who's the nurse that works with you, and she connects the two, the sort of the consumer side of the EHR as well as the more clinical side. So maybe it's having these connectors as part of innovation. And yeah, that's the word. That's a good word. Yeah.
And, the nurse, you have to think differently. I've taken on roles differently with the new setup over the last several years, but she's taking on, what are considered regular secretarial roles. But, to get all those pieces of info or lines of communication intersecting with one individual, being able to facilitate that in and out of the office, it really can help with the exchange of information, in a quick way, in a pertinent and very effectual way. So practicable.
One of the ideas, Chuck, that kind of triggered a thought with me is, maybe instead of calling it a silo, you call it a tribe, and you kind of, instead of trying to break people away from that silo, you just kind of break down the wall of communication. Because to me, the biggest thing about a silo is you're walled, right? You're just so insulated. You don't want to interact with anyone else. I don't think intrinsically there's anything wrong with people wanting to band together to do something. I just think it's wrong of that wall to exist. So to reduce that wall, if we can maybe build some connections, small connections between individuals, I think that may be a way to bridge that. I'm going to give up my seat, by the way, guys, so that maybe Mayo Innovation can hop on.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Colin. I appreciate you coming on.
Anybody else?
Yeah, anybody, hop on. Cascadia, Mayo Innovation, whoever's out there. I'm looking at the list here, trying to see. Is Reinhardt? He may be gone. He was on, and then who else we got? We got Matt tried. I don't know. Matt's having difficulty. So Cascadia, if you want to hop on, Sherry, if you want to hop on.
And I can hop off.
No, stay on.
No. As long as we have one seat open, everybody stays.
Okay.
Sherry's I got my VW. Well, maybe I shouldn't be wearing VW stuff here now with everything.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayo won't be on tonight.
Oh, okay. I have a cold that's going around. Okay. Not much of a voice.
I really enjoyed you on the chat.
Okay. Well, let me actually. Okay. So until someone jumps on, there's actually I happened to my undergraduate degree before I went to medical school was actually accountancy. I was a pre-med accounting major. So I took a lot of courses in economics, and so there was this guy named Coase, Coase, and he basically he won a Nobel Prize, and he invented what's called the economics of the firm. And the economics of the firm has to do with the fact of why do we have firms, companies, organizations? Why do we have when we look out in this landscape, we don't just see a bunch of individuals all buying and selling stuff, but rather we have organizations, and it has to do with what transaction costs. So to an accountant, a transaction is if I sell you something, you get a widget, and I get $10, and it's recorded in your accounting system, my reporting system, and it's recorded to the government, and that's called a hands length transaction. However, there are certain kinds of transaction costs which are less expensive inside a company. Okay, so if you have everybody who sort of understands the procedures and has a similar culture, then basically transferring like a tractor from Division A to Division B in Cargill, okay, a big agricultural company, is less expensive than an agriculture company going out and actually buying a tractor from another. Going down to the tractor sales lot. And I think there's an element of that. I think tribes exist for amongst other things, cognitive efficiency and economic reasons. It's less expensive. It's more efficient if you have a set of people with whom you share a set of workflows, essentially. And so that you can repeat over and over again. They work. You have expectations. Obviously, those can become atherosclerotic. I should know how to pronounce that. Frozen. But hey, we have a fourth person. Hello, Melissa.
Hi.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, guys. Sorry, it's so dark and.
That's okay. What do you think? If you've been listening, what do you think about what you've been hearing?
I have to say, it's for someone, I work in healthcare, but sort of on the periphery, and it's a little, the talk of silos, I felt bad that I hadn't read the blog post before, because I sort of understood it conceptually, but even the term was sort of new to me, quite honestly. And also, to be honest, I was trying to, and maybe you guys could understand this idea of picking sort of tribes that you're in, like what silo would you want to be in? I mean, having worked in hospitals for a long time, it was a while ago. I mean, I know how the different departments and everyone has their own turf and people, but I guess I was a little, to be honest, I'm enjoying listening to you all because you're so articulate, and it's interesting hearing the different perspectives. But that's why I jumped on, but I don't have a ton to add, quite honestly.
It's okay. That's right. You're a city girl.
I lived in Manhattan for a long time, but I live in California now, so not more beach girl.
Okay. I just wonder, because like if you grew up on a farm around silos, the metaphor is just, I can like, okay, do we want to talk about wheat silos or corn silos or soybean silos?
I want to share what Cascadia. Look what Cascadia just typed in. It appears that Melissa is in a hut on the beach. Can I join her tribe?
Please.
It does.
Now, why is it that I can hear? I can't see you, Jimmy, but I can hear you.
Oh, I don't know.
I can't see you either, Jim.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so
well, I don't think I can hop out, or else I lose.
Well,
I wonder if
no. You can. If you're the host, even if you're the only host, I tested this. You can hop out. You can leave as long as there's other people present. So we'll see if I'm true.
Maybe I should.
If we all disappear, I'm wrong.
Okay. Should I hop out and try to join back? You think, or what do you think?
Maybe I should hop out and let.
No. Here, let me try it. If I close everything down, I'll just restart it.
But what you don't do is close the browser. Don't click on the up.
Okay.
X on
I just closed the X. I just closed the little X, right? Just the little X in the right upper square
of the
we
video.
We enjoyed the disembodied.
Yeah, my video. Yes. The little little squares, and I'm going to just click on the X.
By the way, Blab is beta, folks, so it actually doesn't work.
You know what? Blab is awesome. And
I love Blab.
I think you can jump on even in your yoga clothes. She made an excuse. She doesn't want to get on with her yoga clothes.
I tweeted out.
That's what a scarf is for.
Oh, I love it. You have your pajamas on with the scarf, so
hides it all.
You
do. I read an article today about how fitness trainers are starting to use Periscope to conduct their classes. But there was a paragraph in there where, it's not just about, exercising, follow me and mimic my physical movements. It's also tips and people questions and so forth. And so the lady was washing her car while she was giving tips and having conversations with people about fitness. Now, she was like the regular fitness instructor. And I just think that it's so cool the way this can be so casually inserted into our lives.
And it's silo breaking. I think I was trying to remember on the chat who was, Chuck, it was you. You were mentioning that social media could be, I believe it was you, social media or Twitter can be a silo. And then there was some discussion around it that as well, it can be the opposite. It can be what breaks down the silos or connects them. I
love Twitter. It has changed my life for the good in many ways. I didn't realize, and I did not realize that I missed anything. I loathe Facebook. I don't do Facebook, but Twitter is all about sound bites, and I have to say quite a bit of snark. I mean, and I recognize that there's some abuse on Twitter, the trolls and so forth. And when you're face to face, it's much harder to be nasty to someone. And so both on Periscope and on Twitter. Now I've had no problems with trolls on, of course I'm, a guy, so maybe it's different. But I worry about Twitter, and that is I know that the membership is flat, and they're losing money. And you can't do that forever. And so when Twitter bought Periscope for $100 million, all the analysts, applauded it. And then I got on Periscope, and then of course, from Periscope to Blab, and then I realized, this is long form. This is, there's so much more information flowing between me and you two, per second. So, like 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times more than Twitter. Now, I know Twitter is good because of its brevity and because of the fact it's language and text based. But I realize now that I was missing something.
Yeah, it's the depth, because the problem is if you don't think in sound bites, it's hard to consolidate your thoughts into a certain number of characters, and you have to really think it through. And if you even have a touch of ADHD, you're all over the place, and that's interesting. And it's hard to consolidate and put it in a couple little words on Twitter.
But it's also hard to shift the other way. I'm finding it hard to speak in full sentences right now because I just did a Twitter chat where it's 140 characters. You learn to sort of think through the issue differently and come up. So I'm finding it's a bit of a struggle to get back to the more free flow. You can use as many words as you want.
Words that come to mind are telegraphic, staccato. I've been made a co-host. Okay, that means I can kick you guys out if I want to. No,
you can.
But what you're talking about is exactly. I wrote. I have to say, I think I've taken some heat. I have to. If anybody's listening who was involved in that conversation, I apologize. About a month ago, I periscoped during a tweet chat. I basically and it was just a whim. I started reading the tweets and making comments about them, and 30 people showed up, and they were making comments and we're having this conversation, and it was the first time I ever did it. And it was fun, but frenetic. And then Doc Nieder, who also is involved in these tweet chats and so forth, she did it in a much more organized fashion. And the topic was authentic listening in healthcare. And this was like a month ago. And it was because it was a Periscope, I have some technology that allows me to record the video so that you get all the comments and all the hearts, so it's all the animation. So I wrote a blog post about it. Yeah, it's pretty neat. And of course, here's a person. Now, it's an area I do not know anything about. I mean, I'm not a practicing physician. I went to medical school. I've designed software and worked with physicians and so forth. It's an area that I kind of know abstractly off in the distance. But it's not something that I can act like an expert on Twitter. You want to be the expert and you're tweeting all these opinions and so forth. And also, it's a lot of work. Tweet chats are a lot of work. And so Jimmy and I think a couple other people, kind of harassed Doc Nieder to sort of, for 1 hour, to read the tweet chats, read the tweets, and to comment on them, whether she thought this was valid or not, and so forth. And it was stupendous. I mean, I watched it for an hour, and it was better than watching Anthony Bourdain, who I really like. And so that long form. But the problem is, and Jimmy and I did the same thing last week. I think, Melissa, you were involved. Yeah, we did this tweet chat. We did it at the same time. No, and that
must have been a challenge.
Well, it was a challenge.
Because you're thinking in two ways.
No, it's cool though, actually.
Well, but the thing is what I did, the way we did this. Hey, Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy was the moderator, and I read the tweets. So I basically we load.
Oh, you broke it up.
So basically, Jimmy and so what happened is that the people who came on, who I think, Melissa, you were one. In fact, I remember, Melissa, you were talking about how it was very distracting to when But the best conversations on Blab were when the couple of people in the seats actually just kind of ignored the tweets and they reacted to what the topic at hand. And I was the one who basically, at T1, T2, T3, and at about T2 or T3, Colin and Joe, actually, who probably had a second monitor, they were actually submitting the tweet questions over. Now, and so obviously, we are limited in our cognitive capacity and our ability to pay attention to things, and so there is so at some level there's a competition then between what's going on in Blab and what's going on in the tweet chat, which I didn't intend. I'm looking for the synergy. I want the most amount of entertainment and information and empathy and connection per minute as I can. I know that sounds like an industrial engineer, because I am an industrial engineer. And so now this is now happening at 9:30 to 10:30, and I think it's worthy. I think it's very relevant to the silo topic, and so I'm going to actually kind of say. Jimmy, you've been listening to me. Did I do justice to this recent how this Blab got moved and the relevance to silos?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, and I was a little distracted trying to get signed back in, so I actually had to go to the main Blab site. So I was a little distracted, but I think I heard the gist of what you said, and I think it was just a matter of I agree what you said about Dr. Nieder and the Periscope thing. From my perspective, I was watching my daughter's basketball games on Tuesday night, so I missed like 3 or 4 HCLDR chats. And Chuck, by hosting a Periscope, I had my phone, so that was, I think, before I had the tablet. And so I had the phone, so I could actually, through Chuck's Periscoping, could at least appreciate some of the HCLDR chat. And then when Kathy posted it, it was really kind of a cool way. Like he said, she was able to interpret some of the tweets through her own world, and it was a really cool effect. I liked it. Cool.
Jimmy, I want to hear more about this, because I'd really like to. But there's this guy, Nate Ortega, who says, "How does he get in? How does he get in?" So I'm going to leave and see if anybody.
No, I can get up. I can. I don't know how to.
No. I think Jimmy and I can be too talkative, and so I really need to. I really need to take 10 minutes off.
Wait, can I ask you one question?
Yes. Please.
Because you were saying that there was some controversy that you were doing this Periscope and you never really got around to what was the problem?
Well, it's the same controversy as Blab, and that is that if you I like to use the word simulcast, okay,
right,
pulling people away from the tweet chat, and that's and I can understand if you've spent a lot of time creating a really excellent tweet chat. I mean, we were using the tweets as fuel.
No, it was.
To create a really great Blab, but then I don't think Jimmy and I realized that the people who were sort of not on the Blab over there kind of were a little.
Hey, you're almost working as silos there. Then
that's the meta thing going on here. I'm going to step aside. Okay, Nate.
Looks like Nate was just asking what the ultimate content is, and we just had an hour-long tweet chat on.
Sure. Hey, you know what would be really interesting next week if you do it after? It would be really fascinating if I don't know if you could do it, but the tweets that were retweeted the most, to sort of bring a couple of those threads in.
Yes, okay, that would be,
just a couple, so that if there is a lull in the conversation, that it's sort of, because some people there were some pretty different viewpoints, and to sort of bring those about, and also to cast it to a wider audience, because I think if you're not really, really very in deep with healthcare, the whole idea of silos, I mean, even if you understand them conceptually, it's hard to participate. There were a couple people on the tweet chat who really weren't in healthcare, and I think it's interesting when you can bring people outside in, because they see things that we don't see. And that's where real innovation takes place, is when you can kind of intermarry these different disciplines. And
I think a number of folks in the chat also wear many hats, peers, consumers, as well as being healthcare professionals or healthcare IT. So even though we might be more outspoken with one of the tribes that we're belong to, everyone brings along a few
right, exactly. So And you're a nurse, right, Katie? You said you're.
Well, I'm not. I'm similar to Chuck. I haven't been a practicing nurse for about 10 years. I went more to grant writing and working on federal contracts and working in the mental health field.
Right.
And doing research. So I sort of took off. I don't practice I'm still a nurse. I still am proudly a nurse, but I don't practice as one.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt's gonna come. Hey, Matt.
Oh,
now,
great.
Matt, introduce yourself, Matt. He's out of Massachusetts, right, Matt? You're near Boston, aren't you? Is that where you're located? Fairly close?
Yeah, no, I'm about an hour west. I finally figured out my Chrome settings.
And Matt's a lawyer, and we'll allow him on, even though he's a lawyer. He's a good lawyer.
Is that an oxymoron?
And he's married to a doc. He's married to a primary care doc, if I remember correctly. And Matt, go ahead and if it's okay with Melissa and Katie, is it okay if Matt goes? He's been trying to get on. Is it okay if we give him the floor for a few minutes and have him give his perspective? Great.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been an interesting conversation. I was, very mildly paying attention to the tweet chat too, and obviously HIPAA kept catching my eye. I think the whole issue of silos in healthcare is driven a lot by, I think, fear of regulation in the law. People are kind of scared of what they can and can't do, and they don't necessarily take the time to figure it out. So I think that's a big issue, and one that we struggle with on the legal side, because oftentimes we're talking with clients and saying we very rarely say you can't do something. You just have to rethink how you want to do it because you're in healthcare.
Oh.
Yeah. But you know what? When you're on the other side of it, you don't perceive it that way. And so to go against a lawyer's advice, because what you're saying is essentially what we all know when you're in college or graduate school, which is you can say whatever you want. You just have to be able to back it up. So it's a question of if you choose to sort of take a different approach, you just have to know that you need to be able to pull up some evidence and sort of back up your position to some extent. I don't know. That's how I've always conceptualized it.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty fair. It's, just because healthcare by the law is treated the complete opposite from almost every other industry, you just have to think about it from a different angle. So it's, oftentimes when I'm dealing with the business people within a healthcare organization, they have really good ideas and they're trying to do stuff to help the organization, but they're trying to port it from just from everyday business life, and it just doesn't necessarily work in healthcare. So it's just a matter of taking that idea and then reframing it so they can pursue it.
You know what's a great analogy? It's a tiny bit off topic, but your comments made me think about it. There, in the social work profession, in nephrology, there are a couple social workers who have been very insistent and they're very vocal. It's really only one person, but he kind of brought someone else, that they won't do certain kinds of work because it's outside of their scope of practice. And they kind of pull some stuff up. And when you go in and you actually look at the scope of practice, it's actually not there. But they basically on the listserv create this whole aura of fear. And so people aren't doing things on behalf of the patient out of fear. Oh, I'm out of scope of practice. And it's like, okay, well, even if you are, but actually you're not, because you're not, it's so absurd. But their fear kind of hijacks it. And then the patients who really need what you're giving them, which really isn't outside of scope of practice, don't get what they need, because you have a couple people essentially fear-mongering and using little regulations, which, actually could be interpreted a lot of different ways. And a couple of people in a conference room in Las Vegas were creating, it's like absurd. And then the patient loses out. I mean, I'm sure you guys all sort of know what I'm talking about, but...
Yeah, it's the vocal few who might not necessarily understand everything are the ones you got to listen to.
Yeah, and then other people kind of suffer, especially when the patients suffer, that they're not getting what they need. That's just in social work in particular, as it relates. When I created this model to help people, patients who have emotional distress. And they said, well, it's out of our scope of practice. It's not therapy. It's coping interventions. They have a master's degree, but because I didn't want to do it, or they want to, I don't know. It's that kind of stuff. But using the law in that particular way is so. Anyway.
Yeah. So we got Chuck's coming back on, and but Matt, tell us a little bit what you do. In terms of kind of what law you do, and kind of what just on a typical day. What kind of? I've always been kind of a little intrigued. We've talked a little bit on the phone before, but your specialty is HIPAA, is that not?
Yeah. Right.
One of your areas of expertise?
Yes. Yeah. So no, I do a lot with HIPAA. I do a lot with fraud and abuse, like Stark Law, anti-kickback statute, which are, I think those are probably the, kind of the holy trinity from the healthcare law perspective in terms of what influences what you do. So it's, from my perspective, you have to know those regulations in order to then do the rest of what I do, which is really, transactional work. So that's, contracting, having different entities working together, provider groups, hospitals, trying to figure out like a preferred provider agreement or a joint venture. So typical day, it's that kind of stuff. There's very rarely a discrete regulatory question. It's always, how do the regulations influence what you want to do? Like I was talking with a potential client this afternoon that someone who developed a new EMR actually, and is thinking about how to now bring it to market. So it's, what do you do to contract for that? So how do I make sure that he would be protected and then also fit within what's allowed in healthcare?
Sure.
So that's one piece of it. As I was working on another client selling her practice, so working on the sale document for that. So it can be.
So you're not just doing HIPAA. I mean, you're really doing a lot of
tribes and silos. And silos.
Well, I mean, yeah, but you're doing a lot of basically corporate law.
Yeah, and it's the corporate influence by the healthcare regulations. So it's
right.
Because I work, some of my colleagues are just straight corporate, but if they tried to do the deals I'm doing, they wouldn't necessarily understand how it gets influenced and how you actually need to structure it. Because I had a couple earlier this year where business consultants helped them trying to set something up. I stepped in, I took one look at, one aspect. For example, one of them, they were going to buy all the equipment for $1. That's just not fair market value. So that's going to violate, the fraud and abuse laws. But everyone thought, hey, this is great. We're going to get to where we want to go. But
do you do much work at all in the in sort of the health plan payer insurance space?
I don't represent them, but I will help my clients negotiate against them.
Okay.
For example, especially
you're mentioning fraud. What is the trivium in health insurance? It's fraud, waste, and abuse, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, those are. Yeah, it's kind of the hallmark, especially if you talk about like Medicare. That's what they're looking to control. But actually, talking about the health insurers, the interesting thing I get to do is, because I'm in Mass, a lot of people are moving into that capitated realm for their contracts. So I've actually gotten to work representing providers, building in capitated terms with with the payers in terms of how the providers will get paid by the insurance company.
So are you brushing shoulders with the actuaries and people like that?
No, thankfully no.
Okay, because you're only about a step or two away from that. The people, I forget what they call them in the insurance industry, but basically the people who have to set the prices to make sure that they can make a profit.
Yeah, no, that all gets that. And the actuaries do decide that piece of it, and I figure out, especially for like the capitated arrangements, making sure that the right terms are in place so that data is provided in an appropriate manner. Because I think it's been talked about in a lot of different places that to succeed, if you're at risk, you need to have a good flow of data, and you need to be able to access it and have it in real time, essentially. Because if you're lagging at all, you're not going to know how you're doing against your cap figure, which is going to impact potential profitability.
I just happened. Tomorrow I'm going back for the third day. But I'm attending the American Health Insurance Plans Conference on Medicare, Medicaid, and duals in Washington D.C. And some of what, even though you're not working in specifically in that area, a lot of the words you're using are the same words that they're talking about.
Yes, no, it's a cool industry to be in. I think no matter what area you're in, any part of healthcare is a good thing to be into at the moment.
Are you in kind of what's your relationship to IT? Are you just basically a really good person at sort of spreadsheets and some database stuff? Or I get the feeling, though, I mean, these days everybody who's doing anything sophisticated in healthcare has to have a kind of it has to be kind of at least a personal productivity part of their portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, I can get my way around most things. If I can't figure it out, then I'll call my IT department. But for the most part, because I'm probably not the same as the next generation under me. I didn't grow up with it completely, but
do you download and install software?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so like what are a couple of I'm really kind of I used to be an educator, and we taught it was the first undergraduate program in medical informatics I designed, and it was in Pittsburgh, and I flew out to Seattle. This was like early '90s, and I went to the community college there, and I was talking to someone. And they had a kind of a similar program in the community college level, and they said, it's really hard to find anybody who hasn't at least touched a mouse. And this was in the early '90s in Seattle, and it blew me away because basically nobody in our program had even touched a mouse.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in this. People think of there being the MIS department. Well, now a lot of there are marketing departments now in major corporations that have bigger IT budgets than the MIS department. And so this whole and what Jimmy has done, with Chromebook and so forth, he's really kind of configured his own environment. So I'm really fascinated by the way in which things that we used to be reliant on the MIS department to do in a hospital now are either taken for granted or you don't have to worry about it anymore because you use Gmail.
Well, it's kind of like Blab. It's so easy. I'm a computer phobe. I've generally been a computer phobe, but I've had to adapt over the last several years. But some of these applications are so easy to use. And I think as doctors, this whole idea of the EHR, I don't know if you guys saw Zog MD, what's his name? Zog MD did that. It was actually really well done, that video of the EHR and how terrible it is. And he sang about the EHR and what a nightmare it is for physicians. But I think really, there just really needs to be 2 or 3, probably difficult to do for a lot of EHRs, but 2 or 3 subtle changes at the point of care with the right applications, Chuck. Most docs could be doing what I'm doing, I think. And it really has a huge impact on being able to do some really cool things at the point of care. And that is, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me ask Matt. I mean, at this I'm at the Medicare. I also went to the AHIP conference in Nashville, which was the commercial health insurance plans, and and at both places there was a lot of talk of consolidation. For example, financial integration between medical practices and hospitals and so forth. And I'm old enough that I've seen that pendulum swing back and forth several times. I mean, I've seen 30 years ago. Medical practices be acquired, and then 15 years later, I saw the docs leave. They were unhappy, and we don't have any modern equivalent of slavery. So if you want to leave, you can leave. I mean, typical when you buy a practice, they've got 5 or 7 years left, and But if you're younger, and at some point, this pendulum swings back. Okay, and right now, a lot of the consolidation is driven by this IT stuff. Okay. The hospital will let me use their EHR and they'll take care of everything for me. And so, but the pendulum will swing back. The pendulum will eventually swing back, and you will see more doctors move into, because I've seen it several times. And the kind of stuff that we've been talking about with Jimmy, as the software and as all these productivity tools and the ability to basically craft your information management and workflow environment, as that matures and becomes, more, idiot-proof isn't quite the right word, but more facile, you will see the pendulum swing back. I don't know. I was a little bit of a soapbox because the reason I'm concerned about and interested about that is that doctors who work for themselves are a heck of a lot more productive than doctors who work for hospitals.
I agree with you, Chuck. I've had this gut feeling for a little bit, and I don't know, and maybe it's way off base, but I think the pendulum, it can swing back, and I think it is starting to swing back, at least in our region, to a degree. And I think the advantage of being in a large group is you don't have to worry about thinking about getting an EHR, blah, 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 blah. But the downside is you're then stuck with whatever EHR that large organization decides to use, and you have to figure out workflows around that basic, those bigger EHRs that are designed for every physician, every type of physician, really ends up where it's really difficult to use for any one particular physician. They're really difficult to just use on a daily basis. The advantage, I think, and I think why the swing of the pendulum is coming back to the smaller office, docs like me, we can pick and choose the EHR that works the best for us and then tie that into an affordable, very affordable health CRM, and you can work circles around any of those docs in those big organizations in terms of functional stuff that you do day in and day out in terms of with the electronic record matching your workflow. It's real. I think you got to learn something, Chuck.
Jimmy, and I'll be interested in Matt's reaction here. Jimmy, you are a very unusual physician. I mean, you have your sort of philosophy, as well as, even though you say you're a computer phobe, your willingness to sort of dive in and to craft your digital environment for your purposes is I mean, so now I'd love to think that someday that more physicians will do what you're doing, and I think that's a possibility.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said on both sides. There's obviously, you hear a lot about people wanting, or newer physicians wanting to go into the large organization because then they don't have to worry about anything about the business side of things. I think you're right that there is a pendulum that, especially as you can start getting out maybe from the strictures of meaningful use and actually allowing, people to figure out, like Jimmy, implement it how they want to do it. Mm-hmm. But I think there's another factor at play in terms of the consolidation, which is the changing nature of the payment system. Mm-hmm. Because taking away the whole health IT side, which obviously I know we like to talk about, I think is the fundamental shift away from fee for service, which is really driving a lot of the consolidation. Because in order to take on risk, you do have to have some type of critical mass of a panel with each insurer. And the small practices, it's difficult to do that.
Well, are you familiar with, and I don't know enough about them, but I know that at least in terms of kind of like marketing mantra, I'm trying to think of the name. It starts with an A. It's here in DC. I should know them. Adelaide. Okay, so Adelaide is Farzad Mostashari's.
Yeah.
Now I haven't really, but I mean, superficially, it seems to be about you in this new environment, this new, however you want to describe, which you just described, which is you need scale in order to spread the risk or to manage the risk. Even in this environment, apparently, there are folks saying that the practices can maintain their independence. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, when I say you need to, that it's harder for the small practices to do it, and I guess it depends on what you mean by independence too. Is it independence that you're a small practice, or is it independence that you're outside of the hospital? And I think there is a big thing to be said for physician practices, even large physician practices, to not be tied to a hospital, but to just be a physician practice, and you can choose which facilities you're going to use. Because a lot of the data you see, it says the ACOs that are physician-led are the ones that are more successful.
Now, Matt, have you had any experience with direct primary care in your region? And how does direct primary care physicians, how do they adapt to the ACO field of play?
So I know one DPC practice, and I've actually spoken with that doctor. He's up on the North Shore of Massachusetts. So right now, I think he said he's the only true DPC practice in the state. And I think he said one other is going to be opening soon. If you're DPC, you're kind of outside this whole problem because you're not dealing with, you've already created essentially your capitated program for yourself. Because if you're DPC, you're not taking any type of insurance. and actually, I talked to him recently, and the issue he came up with was referrals, because a lot of his patients still have insurance for specialist care because he's just primary care, but some of the insurers require an in-network PCP to give the referral to get the specialty care. So I think that's going to be an issue that is going to need to get figured out on the DPC side of things.
Well, here's a question for you, Matt. So today, or no, it was yesterday, I attended a session that had 4 past CMS administrators, including McClellan and Tavener, and they. Oh, one of them, I think it was Scully, predicted. Well, it had to do with this idea that they use the phrase premium support, which is, as I understand it, this idea of you want people to make choices because the system doesn't, the competitive system and all that information doesn't flow around in the free market well unless people can actually decide whether to they want to conduct business with this organization or that organization. But there is still a need to subsidize healthcare from kind of an insurance and kind of risk management point of view, and you can see how that would be true with patients, for sure. Because we'll give so we'll give the money to the patient, and the patients will choose because from various sort of economic theories, you want the rational agent that's closest, who's maximizing their own utility to make those decisions in order to because the Soviet style 5-year plan, centralized plan, doesn't work. But there's a version of that though that's also true of doctors. So the doctors want to be able to conduct their business with whichever health facility that they feel serves their patient best. Okay. So is there a kind of an analogy there, a kind of a version of premium support but instead of locking the doctor into some system for spreading the risk purposes, to kind of have your cake and eat it too? I did not explain that very well. Choice. What was your undergrad? Sorry, you've taken a course in economics, so people comparing alternatives and making choices so as to maximize some measure of goodness or utility is part and parcel of one model of a market system. Okay, and does that apply to doctors anymore, at least at this level that we're talking about, or could it?
I think it probably could. It's just a matter of, to some degree, it's a matter of getting enough information out there because it's such an opaque system at the moment. And I think that's been one of the criticisms is you don't have enough information to really be able to make those types of choices. You're kind of locked in, and it's really getting everyone's voice heard as well. I think I was talking about it with, someone in my office today or someone on a call today where, we're talking about all these things about trying to change the delivery of healthcare and putting more responsibility on the providers for outcomes, but then you're not bringing the patient into the picture. You're putting all this burden onto the physicians, but you're not making the patient have any responsibility. Obviously, each individual should always have the right to say, no, I'm not going to do that. But then there has to be a consequence back for that action aside from bad health, which is always a potential consequence. But now you're creating an additional burden on your physician where they're having money taken away because you're not willing to follow the advice or that you're not working together.
Well, we talked about that. We talked about that last blab. And Chuck, what's the law you talked about? You mentioned that phenomena where I think what's going to happen, and I think it's just a matter of time, where you're going to get cherry picking. So you're going to have this huge number of patients, complex patients. No docs will want to touch because they're not going to get reimbursed. They're the non-compliant, and they're the ones that are going to cost you and decrease your reimbursement because you aren't going to have good outcomes if you have those types of patients.
Well, that's the law was Goodhart's law.
Good. That's right. That's
right. And it's interesting that you bring it up because I'm being at the CMS conference. They're talking about measures of quality a lot. And Goodhart wasn't actually an economist; he was a banker, but it's sort of lumped in with various economic laws, and that is that as soon as you and it makes sense, common sense, but as soon as you make a measure of quality. As soon as you incent a measure of quality, it becomes worthless as a measure of quality. Basically, it gets gamed. Okay, yeah. So the Soviet Union, awarded wanted to maximize the number of nails produced, so it got 1 billion nails that were tiny, and they were useless. So I said, okay, we'll reward the weight of the nail. So then I got nails the size of boxcars. You see, and so And my wife works in healthcare and in the quality area, particularly in the kind of patient satisfaction, customer service, and so forth. And it is and she does, and there is I don't think of hello, Katie. How do you incentivize a system without turning its quality measures to crap?
I think if any of us had the answer to that question, we'd all be very rich.
Can I say why I jumped back?
Oh, yes. Yeah, Katie, come on back.
Can I say why I jumped back in? Just to bring up, I was listening to what you were talking about, Matt, that it's all being put on the provider. And there is a huge patient movement about patient empowerment and beyond patient-centered, really flipping it up and being patient-driven. That patient-centered isn't enough, that the patient needs to be the driver. So just to throw it out there that is really the energy that's out there and the way it's going versus sort of being the provider-centric.
And I think and Katie, what I've been doing with sharing the screen where I can actually put with my upgrades in my software, I can actually put the most current health maintenance recommendations, the lung cancer screening that wasn't even available several years ago for smokers, high risk patients, HIV screening, things that are up to date, informational and very helpful, so that Matt, I can go over with my patients right at the time, but they have their choice, but I'm able to put it on a visual display and we can talk about it. And if they say no and they don't want to do it and they understand the ramifications, but yet my quality metrics are terrible, but really it comes down to patients' ability to decide. And if they don't want to do these recommendations, that's their choice. And I don't have a problem at all as long as they understand and we go over it.
Yeah, it's an informed choice. Yeah.
But to base your quality metric scores on outcomes, I think really misses that whole dynamic relationship that really needs to take.
And because we have a lawyer here, don't the quality aren't these quality metrics written into the contracts?
On top of the fact that if people
wait, hold on.
Sorry,
my wife is talking to the side, who's a primary care physician.
Yeah. What did she say?
Would you like to come join?
Yeah, have her come on.
She's just saying how difficult from the provider perspective it is to try and stay on top of all this.
Well, and also, the other problem is not just from the patient perspective, like the provider perspective is that there's a lot of for the outcomes-based stuff, there's a lot of manpower that goes into these registries and the medical assistants and nurses calling patients to follow up on their labs that they don't want to do. I mean, it's not just even that I care if I get paid or not, but it's also everyone else is wasting a lot of time when people don't want to do things.
Yes, absolutely, right on.
So what I just heard that is the cost of collecting quality data is not worth the benefit of that quality data. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the patient in the medical home.
No, I don't think it's that she's saying that it's the cost of collecting. I think it's the cost of trying to engage with everybody. especially for people who don't want to be engaged, that it takes a lot of time and effort.
But it's like measured against what I like. It's like a measure of what I'm doing.
But it's going, Chuck. I think it's going to your point that they're economizing the quality measure, so it's creating a monetary value. So they're trying to hit it.
Yeah.
And people are engaging back with them, so they're spending a lot of money to try and do it.
Yeah.
And then it's not actually doing anything.
Yeah.
No offense, Matt, but I'm
I don't know.
I mean, a lot of the things are good for the patients, but not everything is good for them.
So, I mean, I think part of the question there is instead, kind of picking up on what you said, Katie, about the patient, in my opinion, at least, there really needs to be a collaborative model where everyone's on the same page, and there doesn't need to be an upper hand. There just needs to be an equal dialogue.
Yes, absolutely, Matt. I agree with you. And I think one of the best places to do that is right in the patient examination room at the interface, and use the electronic record and the computer as a friend, not as a distraction. And I think if used smartly, it can really help develop that relationship, and you can have these wonderful tools to help do that in a very efficient but great way to enhance care, I think, and then result in, I think, probably better outcomes than if you weren't able to do that. I think what we're trying to do with meaningful use and all these metric scores, we're doing it backwards. It's like almost the whole reason to take care of a patient, it almost becomes you're doing things out of fear, not because it's the right thing to do, and it's because you have this wonderful Paracelsus driven, the wonderful physician from the 1500s, Paracelsus, he said, in order to be a true, wonderful physician, you have to be like the Good Samaritan. And that's one of my approaches, is you have to be stubborn. You can't move from that stance, and then you have to adapt the technology. It's like a horse. You got to saddle it, bridle it, and make it do what you want it to do. And if you're stubborn and you take care of patients the right way, this stuff will work for you. And then the natural consequences of the downhill flow will likely result in better care. Not always, but generally more so than what we're trying to do with meaningful use and these other things. I think we're doing it backwards. I think it has to be started with the patient, with the patient's best interest at heart, and you just get the most pertinent, up-to-date information to them, share it visually, and work things through together. And,
and I agree.
That's my perception.
And I agree with Matt. It is a collaboration, but the patient's at the center of all of this, and it's using, like you said, it's a collaboration. It's using peers and physicians, nurses, lab, pharmacy, everyone all together. But to remember that the patient, is the center. And so there is no such thing really as compliance or non-compliance. If that person's stepping up and wants to, there's health literacy there's information, but ultimately it's that person's choice. But I agree. It's a good point. It is a collaboration.
Folks, I have to go to bed.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
The same thing.
Oh, yeah, we probably better.
I'm really enjoying it, and I can't tear myself away. And I hope we get to do this again next week, Jimmy. If Colin and Joe and Bernadette will allow us, and I hope to see Matt and Katie again.
Thanks for letting me come back in.
Thank you.
That's
okay.
Yeah.
We will see each other. We're probably looking at 20 years of blabbing. We'll be blabbing out of a retirement home, hashing over the same darn thing. So I look forward to a long association. Good night.
Right.
Night, Jim. Night, Matt.
All.
Night, Chuck.
Good night.
Good night.
We're neighbors, Matt. I live on the other side of the city.
Yeah, I will shoot you. I'll shoot you a DM on Twitter tomorrow.
Brilliant. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Katie.